And we are back with another episode of The Unfair Advantage. I am your host, Brad Starnes. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Jacob Talkin, founder of Talkin Hospitality Solutions. Jacob has a impressive background where he earned his degree in actuary science, finance, and management from the University of Washburn in 2020. After he graduated in 2020, he began his full-time role as an actuary for a life insurance company in Minnesota, where he then quickly decided to move back home. And then after moving back home, he began a role as a data scientist with the banking and finance industry under two entrepreneurs in Kansas City, which is where I spent the last 6 years of my life at. So in just a few minutes, I'll be interested to see who those two entrepreneurs are. And then in 2021, he wanted to turn what was a high school passion, managing a local fast food joint, as well as local food and beverage operations, into a hobby by beginning his own hospitality solutions business, where he now offers staffing and food vending services to venues around the country. But what's interesting is as his business began to grow, he had just moved into his house and woke up with some severe pain. Was missing roughly 20% of his body weight, went through all kinds of testing for cancer, different autoimmune disease, and was diagnosed with chronic inflammatory response syndrome, CIRS, which we will talk about here in a little bit. And he then actually had to leave his job as a data scientist, where he was then able to focus on his health and growing his business full time. And just like me, advocating for those who stutter, he plans to then kind of soon expand his journey in helping those that are kind of navigating the same path as him. But prior to diving into that, I wanted to remind everybody that today's episode is sponsored by Screaming Cow Marketing Group, which is a full service marketing agency aimed at helping home service businesses grow their leads through utterly unforgettable marketing. If your business is looking for more business to do, you can call the guys that move. Jacob, welcome on.
Thanks, Brad. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going to kind of get the elephant out of the room that I mentioned in the intro. So I spent the last couple of years in Kansas City. Do you mind sharing who those two entrepreneurs were?
Yeah, you may have heard of them, maybe not. So Mike Sinatra and Clint
Okay.
Harris. Mike Sinatra's got a background with a transportation business, and I
Okay.
can't speak too much on that, but I know he not only a smart entrepreneur, but he was right time, right place, and I think he gained a huge connection with Cerner when they were out here.
Okay.
And it really skyrocketed his business and really put his name on the map. And now he's got
Okay.
certain other businesses. So
Yeah, absolutely. I know. So my last business was a fintech app that basically automated payments for shared households. So got very involved with a lot of people in Kansas City, from Parker Graham, Donald Hawkins, some different people like that. Those were two individuals that shockingly I did not hear about, but I saw banking and finance industry, and I'm like, maybe Parker, maybe Donald. Those are kind of the two that I was uh, thinking of. So why don't you kind of give me a little bit of a background about, obviously kind of covered a little bit in the intro, but how you got into entrepreneurship? Seems like it began when you were in high school, maybe even prior to that.
yeah, so as with probably any entrepreneur's start, I grew up with, wanting to sell snacks out of my locker in elementary, middle school, and school didn't like that. And whenever it snowed outside, you want to shovel snow for $10,
Mm-hmm.
$20. And you think you're winning when really you realize when you get older that the person paying you $5 for 4 hours of work was winning. So, but anyways, it's the spirit that matters, and how you use that to get further. So, yeah, just always wanted to figure out how to generate business in whatever way, and um, being a hard worker, I hope at least the people I work with would say so. You reach a point where hourly rates and things like that get disinteresting, and you want to, and as an entrepreneur, you just want to drive some sort of commission. So, just finding any way to bring that money in was always what I wanted to do. And when I went to Washburn University, kind of different way of doing that. I tried to drum up some organizations on campus to bring some financial aid, and increase my leadership on campus to drive whatever I wanted to drive, to travel for the school, to do whatever I could. But yeah, entrepreneurship just showed up everywhere as a young kid.
Yeah, yeah. I recall always like I was the guy. I lived in a pretty like spread out neighborhood growing up. And so anytime we had like any amount of snow in the forecast, not like what we got 2 weeks ago where the weather guy said, oh, nothing's going to happen. And we got like 4 or 5 inches. But I was like, the night before I was going through, I think like you and I are just on that line where like we kind of recall the white pages, yellow pages, that kind of stuff. But I was online on like white pages and I would filter by anybody who was like 60 plus in our neighborhood. And I would call and pre-sell shoveling their driveways for the night before. So then everybody else that was out there, like they'd be like, nope, sorry, I already have somebody who's like committed to it, this and that. And people were like, how am I missing out on all this revenue? And I'm like, I'm just the guy that was hitting the phones the night before and trying to drive as much business as I could. But yeah, the joke was definitely on us for being out there hustling. Although I didn't think I did. I think at the time I was charging like 25, $30 for a driveway. We would shovel driveways, sidewalks, and kind of like a path to their mailbox and all that. And eventually I thought I got smart and negotiated with my dad to buy a snowblower, kind of go through some driveways and everything a little bit faster. And I think we split the cost 50-50. And somehow I'm in St. Louis now. That is still in his house, not mine. And after we bought that, it was like we got almost like no snow after that.
Hmm.
And then I moved off to Kansas City, go to college, all of that. So again, I was not the one who made it out on top there. That was definitely him. So want to talk a little bit about like your business and what you're doing now. So, kind of, I guess, give you a little background. I have a little bit of knowledge in this space just because my father-in-law is also in this space. So he handles all the concessions and everything at Mizzou. So have enough of an idea of kind of what goes on, but not enough to actually say I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So, well, it started for me working. My first ever job, actual W-2 job, was in high school working for the Kansas City T-Bones,
Okay.
small independent league baseball team out here. And I was chicken and fried guy. So it was the opening day, sold out game. And literally, my job was to boat up chicken and fries and to call back to the kitchen when we needed more. And I tell you what, after that first day, I was never doing it again. But here we are. So I finished off that 7-game homestand, and it was really intense. And at one point, a couple years later, the general manager in charge there asked me to be in charge of the warehouse. So that comes down to ordering products, managing inventory, managing warehouse staff, et cetera, et cetera. And at one point, other stadiums started reaching out saying, hey, can you help us out? So Sporting KC, Cable Bomber Arena, Kansas Speedway, other local racetracks, or other local venues. And yeah, so I graduated from college, and my mom was not happy with the idea of me ever spending my life in this industry. Uh, but then I figured, as an actuary and data scientist, I could at least keep the passion alive by starting a little side business, because stadiums would still reach out and say, hey, do you have 2 or 3 people that could come help us out? Or can you come help us
Mm-hmm.
out? And finally, I thought we should start a business out of this. So I started the business. It was meant to be weekends and a few evenings. And just kept getting phone calls. And Steve's predecessor actually was kind of my, really number one contract to start out. But really, what we do is we work with different venues. Some of them we offer simple staffing, as any staffing company does, except ours isn't focused in IT or tech or anything. Ours is specifically food and beverage vending and a little bit of other stadium operations.
Okay.
But we will supply people for that. But what we've kind of transitioned to, which is more enjoyable, usually more profitable, and a little easier to manage usually, is food vending. So not only do you offer staff, but there's a little more leeway for both profit and expense management by offering the food itself and the menu itself. So, like for instance, Steve, who connected me with you, we build menus with him, and we show up with our own staff, our own menus, and we sell those items. So pretty simple.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, as you're talking, I'm like, I'm sitting here, and with so many things going on, I'm like, wait, was this somebody who saw my post? Or did I get connected? So as you're talking, I'm like, I was introduced by my father-in-law to you, and all of that. We actually, I don't know if you've met the, there's a guy that I had in the podcast, I guess 2 weeks ago. His episode should be releasing soon, but he does some interactions with him and everything like that, and on Mizzou's campus. So always cool to see how everything kind of overlaps, and all the different connections and all that. So so you're in the kind of staffing, food and beverage industry. Um, to me, that is an industry that I have stayed out of. I did like a job bussing tables when I was 15, going on 16, maybe made it 6 months. I did catering for pasta house here in St. Louis for a couple years, but it was only because all my friends were working that job, and like I had nothing to do on the weekends because they were all working. So I was like, why not go work with my friends and hang out with them while we are on the clock? But other than that, like I've like stayed away from it, which is probably why your mom wasn't too happy whenever she kind of heard that you were still dabbling in it a little bit. But what does it look like now for you? A lot of people try to shift out of that mindset from working in the business to working on the business. And so probably your mom's fear was a lot of you working in the business, like kind of doing all the work yourself. I imagine right now you're in a spot where you're pretty close to not doing that, and you just work on the business, and you have a great team who handles a lot of the execution.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I will add to that real quick. When I first started, it was one of those jobs I was embarrassed to tell my friends about. But it's crazy how that transitioned. And I am getting to the point where it's working more so on the business than in the business. However, I enjoy it. So it's really easy to want to stay attached to being in the business. Obviously, there's a trade-off, because the more you're in the business, the harder it is to grow.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and the fear was more of, it's oftentimes, depending on where you're at, it can be risk, low reward business where, COVID hits and it's one of the first industries to take a dive. And on top of that, it's for many people a low paying, low salary business. So that's a double-edged sword. But yeah, it's slowly getting to the point where I'm working on the business. I will say, as we talk about my health issues and they come up, it's slowed me down a little, which forces me to be a little more in the business, because I'm a little less proactive and a little more reactive, sadly. So
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I want to jump into the health and everything after this, but I'm noticing the timeline. So you began this in kind of 2021 is really when you began go. So obviously we're in the middle of the pandemic. At that point, it seems like you did not have your health diagnosis yet. And so what was that like growing a hospitality business in the pandemic? Like 2021, we were still in it, but we weren't at the same time. So you kind of had to balance both of that. Kind of, I say, the roller coaster of, shutdowns, not shutting down, all of that.
yeah, good question. So at the time, I actually still had I was actually towards the beginning of my data science job.
Okay.
So I was working 50 to 70 hours a week and traveling with them all the time. And it was a lot of fun, very entrepreneurial experience. But on top of that, I had this going. And with the full-time job, around a six-figure salary, like it made this more of a fun thing where you feel less stress on whether it works, whether it doesn't, which I think secretly is beneficial. Um, um, and so I'm trying to think of where exactly I'm going with this.
Yeah.
So it was more of I had people reaching out to me for assistance. So Steve's predecessor and then a couple other venues were reaching out to me for help. So I then thought, hey, I have 2 or 3 streams of revenue lining up, which is, one of the safest ways I think to start a business is to find revenue streams that will work and then set up the business. So it really wasn't too frightening. And it was coming out of COVID, which I think actually helped generate some revenue opportunities. People weren't too interested in being in the food and beverage industry at the time, and it's still growing as we speak.
Yeah.
So I was actually in a pretty awesome situation at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something I was actually chatting when I recorded last Thursday with somebody on the podcast. He is actually running a junk uh, removal business and everything, and he's working full time, and he's like, and that's kind of what he said. He was like, I get to enjoy, he's like, I love what I do for a career. And he's like, I don't really have any plans right now to step aside full time from my career to do the business. He's like, but I can enjoy and like love the business because I don't have to worry about all the added um stress of like, am I going to make payroll? Am I going to be able to pay my bills? That kind of stuff. And I, fortunately, but unfortunately, did not make that wise choice. And I had closed down my last business, worked a job for 6 months. We got back on our feet, got a little bit of a nest egg. We were, my wife worked for Cerner, who was acquired by Oracle, and she was on like a government contract, and we're like, "There's no way she's going to get laid off, any of that stuff." And June 5th of last year, she was, and so it's like at the beginning, I didn't get to enjoy as much of like growing my agency like I should have because of the fact that like I had all this added like noise that I didn't need, and if I just would have like stuck it out with the job I had or any job for an extra 3 6 months probably would have made things a little bit more enjoyable up front and everything like that. So that's definitely something as people are listening. I'm always like, if you got the opportunity to get things rocking and rolling on the side while you have some cushion income coming through, probably the best idea because some people, not naming me, weren't that intelligent with it. So,
It
um,
takes guts to do
so
that. So
yes.
you're not giving yourself enough credit.
Yes, it does. So obviously you're in this, in the middle of the pandemic, growing the business, all that stuff. You just bought a house, just renovated the house, which is ironic in how this is playing out. Cause my wife and I had just bought our house and we're going through the renovations of our house when she was diagnosed with her autoimmune. And so just kind of looking at the timeline and everything, it's crazy how we're connected and kind of walking through this right now. But wanted to kind of see, what did that journey look like for a lot of people when you say, oh, I have an autoimmune, like, and I was the same way. Like I kind of dismissed it in a way up front. Like I didn't see the effects except for the fact that my wife, I called her Alvin for a little bit because her face kind of like swelled up a little bit. And I was trying to have some fun with what was going on. But it took months and months of testing and doctor's appointments and head CTs and all these different things that we did not expect. And I'm sure that was the same way for you. So interested to see kind of how this all played out, how you kind of found out about it. Obviously, you had the pain and the weight loss and all that.
Yeah, so it's such a scary situation, and it sounds so similar in how this played out. So, when the business was doing well, and I still had my full time job, and I had just gotten in a relationship for the first time in years because I felt like I was in that position again. I thought finally it was time for me to start slowing down because if you can't tell, I have very ADHD type drive where I have a problem with slowing down. But soon, a few weeks after moving into that renovated house, I loved it. However, woke up with my eyes just bloodshot red day after day. My skin was burning. I don't even know how to explain that sensation. And it was just day in and day out. I struggled to keep my eyes open. It was just so bad. I was going to dermatologists, eye doctors, and they were giving me such simple remedies that weren't doing anything. So here's a little test tube of this ointment. Rub it on. Come back in a month if it doesn't do anything.
Yep.
Uh, did absolutely nothing. And I mean, I've learned. I'm thankful they at least tried because there's some people who don't even do that. But it was just a crazy experience. And then one day I woke up, and I'm not a big person to start with. I weigh about 175 pounds, and I woke up just below 140. Uh,
Oh, wow.
and I had changed nothing. Was actually, I think, eating more at the time. And it was just terrible. And I was chronically tired to a point where I never experienced. I could sleep when I could finally get myself to sleep through Benadryl or whatever else I needed to take. I could sometimes get 12, 13 hours of sleep. Granted, I would wake up once or twice an hour to have to go to the bathroom. Um, and I would wake up the next day more tired than I've ever been before, 5 minutes after waking up. So it was just a scary experience. And it got scarier and scarier as I went to the emergency room a few times, and a couple of those times they were like, this is in your head, which was a scary thing because I've never had health issues other than like simple constipation or stitches. So that was a new
Yep.
experience with traditional medicine. And finally, I was trying an infrared sauna as one of the avenues to just kind of help with the inflammation. And this guy there asked kind of why I was coming, and I told him, and he said, "Oh my gosh, we have somebody in the exact same situation. Have you heard of CIRS?" and he connected me with this lady. She told me about the book she read to kind of understand this issue, and the doctor she went to see, all that. So I bought the book, read it while I was in the sauna, multiple days in a row, and then finally went to the website mentioned in the book, found the doctor, and he set up some blood tests and checked for some sort of autoimmune gene. And sure enough,
Yeah.
it was all there.
Wow, that is. Uh, I don't. I don't curse often, but there is something that's fucking wrong with our healthcare system and all of that. That like, you have to be a advocate for yourself, and doctors are just so. And don't get me wrong, I feel like I have a fantastic doctor and this and that, but you have to go through so much of just advocating for yourself to even get to a point. Like there's some things we're working through right now where like this new doctor she's seeing just like diagnosed or basically said, yeah, we're gonna run some tests, but it's probably just this. And it's like there if it was just this, our other doctor wouldn't have referred us to somebody who's an expert like you. Like they're educated enough to be able to make a just blanket diagnosis like you just did.
Mm-hmm.
And you just have to do so much self advocating, which is crazy. So I was kind of looking online as you were talking and everything like that, just looking at some of like the symptoms and those things. So like, there's different things like lack of concentration, brain fog, depression, muscle spasms, fatigue, headaches, that kind of stuff. Which in any job is good, or any way of life that's going to, really set you, I'd say almost like set you back from like your goals and your success. And being an entrepreneur, like you are going 1,000 miles a minute, like all these things going on. So how did you navigate like, and currently like balancing all of that while also trying to run a business? 'Cause I imagine there's times like there's days where my wife gets home from work and she's like, I just need to rest on the couch for like an hour. And I just have to acknowledge the fact that that is what's going on. That's how we have to do things. Um, but as a business owner, you sometimes don't have the option to just relax and sit back. And when shit's hitting the fan, you have to like pay attention to it. So I imagine you've had to kind of put yourself in a position to navigate those things.
Yeah, yeah. So those symptoms you mentioned, those really hit home. And the brain fog, if you recall, like 10 minutes ago when I struggled to even connect my sentence to the question you asked 5 seconds earlier, that's definitely one of the scariest symptoms that comes with this. It's not painful like many of the other items are, but I actually had to get a brain scan, a special brain scan called a neuroquant that they use to kind of, it's one of the few ways to quantify this kind of chronic issue. Um, since a lot of the symptoms aren't actually noticeable, I look pretty normal to people that haven't seen me in months. So um, my brain actually had a significant amount of atrophy, which will come back in time, but it leads to a lot of cognitive issues with memory. I mean, sometimes I can't remember what I did 2 days ago, where I slept 2 days ago. I have to keep very strong notes of everything I'm doing. It's a really scary experience. And before I knew the answer to all this, I was so scared because I used to get up at 4:30 in the morning, go to the gym for 2 hours, and then I would start my day, try to get a lot of my business ready before my full-time job. And um, those first few weeks when this started, I was so scared because I couldn't remember what I did yesterday, and I had no answer what was wrong. So I was so sure I was never going to get that back. But as I continue on this so-called protocol, it will come back. But navigating it, finding an answer, as I'm sure in the situation of your wife, is probably the scariest part. And it's just scary to live through pain day in and day out and just have no idea what's wrong. And I'm getting tested for leukemia, lymphoma. I'm getting sent to an autoimmune doctor. I'm getting sent to the Center for like Special Diseases at KU, all that stuff. But as it comes to running the business, it's much easier now. I mean, it finally got to the point where I had to leave my full-time job, as we know now. I was working from home for months there, and finally it was kind of an agreement between all of us that if I wasn't going to be in the office, that I needed to leave, because that's just kind of the mantra of the owners. So that took off 50 hours of work off my
Yeah.
plate. So things got much easier. The hardest part really is anxiety. So this issue leads to a ton of anxiety. cortisol and other items get stuck at very high, very low levels. And it just leads to high levels of anxiety or serotonin. Your body has little to
Hmm.
no serotonin, which is what leads to the depression. Um, so those are really the hardest things to juggle, to find joy in what you do sometimes. Like, for instance, we did the Formula One race last year, which is something I dreamed of doing with my business. And it was just another task at a time. I could be there and recognize how awesome it was to finally be able to say I could do this with my own business, but I
Yeah.
couldn't feel the level of excitement. So those are probably the hardest parts, is just to be able to juggle, 100 to 200 people, their emotions, and then also be able to just I don't know, pretend to be normal, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are some ways that like you kind of, I guess I'd say, set yourself up for success during the week and in the day to kind of navigate those things? Anxiety is something that I never had until I really got like knees deep into being an entrepreneur and all of that. So obviously you have this that just causes it, as is, and then you have running the business all there. Like there's things that I do throughout the day and throughout the week to really help kind of like, I guess say like ground myself in a way, to help with that aspect for me. So what are some of those things that you do?
Yeah. So some simple things I didn't used to I did not used to believe in as much as I do now, but simple, very very strict diet, just eating healthy, getting out of the sun. Um, some of those things that a lot of traditional people like I was before this issue pass off. Um,
Yeah.
a lot of those simple things are great. The other thing is to just plan ahead. When you have off time, plan ahead, get anything scheduled that you can, uh, and also be honest and just do the right thing. If you have nothing, really just try to limit what you can be anxious about, right? That's a great way to, to limit that. So, yeah, hope
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, one of the things I was talking with a guy a couple weeks ago, like he's like the most simple thing that I can do to help with the anxiety is just like take out a piece of paper and like write things down. And he's like, and write down like, okay, if what I'm thinking happens, here's what happens next. And he's like, and then you realize that like there's nothing to be anxious about because it's like it's not as bad as you think it is and everything. And it was like, wow, that's a pretty simple thing to do. And like it helps a lot of people in that case. So um,
That's so true. That's so true. And I do write down notes, and that helps. And one other, you're right about the kind of the fear of just things that are unlikely to happen. So simply, I have had fears recently of losing contracts with venues, for really no reason at all. In venues that might make up a huge percent of our revenue. So it seems like we do a good job. They ask us to come back. So I think it's kind of a unnecessary fear.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sure like for the longest time with my speech and everything, like I would be afraid to go like have conversations or go to networking things because I'm like these people are going to think that I'm not confident or I lack the ability to do the work and this and that, and it was like all that shit was in my head. Like nobody actually cared or like I wasn't going to lose a deal or anything like that. It was just and I probably would have if I kept myself in that mindset because I just would have gone down this path of like trying to make sure it didn't happen, which then would have caused it to happen, which is always things that people go through. Um, so you navigating all this. I I'm asking this question knowing you and I couldn't talk about it before we hopped on here, but uh, having a solid support system is crucial. I have learned how to be a much better support system to my wife, as much as she's been a phenomenal support system to me and like entrepreneurship and all of that. But what does that support system look like for you? And people who may not have the best of support system or people like me who are like I'm always trying to find the best way that I can help my wife and support her in this and that. What are what are some of the best ways that you can get some of the best support? One, navigating the autoimmune, but two, being an entrepreneur as well. Like it's there's two paths here.
Oh, that's tough. I mean, it sounds like you come from a pretty traditional family as well. But coming from a traditional background, it was even hard for myself to believe what was wrong with me, because I'm used to thinking, just give me a pill, I'll take it for 3 months, and then we'll all go return to our life. But that wasn't the answer. So explaining to family and stuff what exactly was wrong, was so difficult. Um, And it really led to me trying to find the answer to this on my own. But once I at least found the answer, kind of talked them through it, um, they got on board. They've helped me so much since then. There's still days where I think they can definitely are like, is he making this up or whatever? Because there's some
Right.
such strange things that come with this. But I would not be where I'm at without them. I mean, there's so many events I've had where I had to remove myself, um, and it was just, I mean, it was so scary. And they took the reins for me. They handled it, and that's on the business side of things. But they've done so much for me in terms of having to move several times and find safe places for me to sleep at night, things like that, that are just things I really don't talk to the average human about. And honestly, talking
Yeah.
to you about this, I mean, not even Steve knows much about this, so I haven't mentioned much about this to anyone. So
Yeah.
this is kind of the first time really talking to people about it.
Yeah.
But support system is by far the most important thing, and this is actually called the CIRS is actually nicknamed the relationship ender. So it led to me having to leave my job. It led to that relationship I had when I moved in the house ending. And you know, if she's listening or does listen, well, thank you for being. I mean, she offered so much support at the time. We had a little bit of falling out, but it definitely was this that led to a lot of issues.
Yeah.
But support's the number one thing.
Yeah. I've been going through the process of like, I just am fascinated about how different things, line up and kind of have this chain reaction and everything. And it's like, obviously going through having an autoimmune and everything that you have to go through is tough, but it's like, would you have been forced to go all in on the business as soon as you did, or would you have been forced to do X or Y if you didn't have it? And so it's like a double edged sword at the same time. It's like you're grateful for it, but you're not at the same time, which is a tough kind of position to be in, as well.
Yeah, it is, and I've always struggled with whether things are meant to happen or not, and just kind of other kind of hope and religion based items. But going through this, I've really seen a lot of things line up that have kind of helped me to probably believe that or strengthen my relationship with religion and whether things are meant to be, in my opinion. Uh, but I definitely would probably still have a full time job if it wasn't for this kind of disease. However, I do some contract data science work with him currently. So we
Yeah.
still have a good relationship, but it's from home and it's a few hours a week, and it is a small percentage of the revenue of the business.
Hmm.
But yeah, I definitely would not be running my own business right now if it wasn't for
Yeah.
sickness.
Yeah. Well, and that small contract work is probably what keeps your wheels turning and kind of is like your little side hustle and all of that, to keep innovative, in a way. That was one of many reasons why I began the podcast. Is I was like, I'm trapped in my office all the time during the week, and it's like halftime there'd be a day or two, a couple days I'd go by, and like besides my internal team, which I love and great and fantastic and everything, it was like I was having no opportunity to communicate with people and just like let the natural juices flow and feel innovative and think and talk and all that stuff. And so, there's just doing things like having that contract for you definitely probably help there. So, um, so as we're wrapping up here, we've talked a lot about the autoimmune and all of that stuff. I always like to kind of end these with, if there was some advice you could give to somebody who's listening, who's going through having an autoimmune, a support system of being an autoimmune, but most importantly, like doing that while trying to grow a business. Because for a lot of people, and this is really the reason why I like began this podcast, is because it's like something like this could really send somebody else down a path where they just decide to shut everything else out in life. They're not going to continue on with their dreams, their goals, their aspirations. And you've really said, well, F that. I'm going to kind of grab this where I can and just learn to adapt and live with it. So what's some advice you would give to those people?
Man, well, from a simple human perspective, first off, I would just say to treat everyone like you want to be treated as you learn as a kid, because you never know what other individuals are going through. Uh, and that's something that I used to struggle with, and that's part of why I think I was meant to go through this. But from an entrepreneurial side, um, I would say understand that things like this, as you would say, they're not a setback, they're a setup.
Mm-hmm.
And so focus on the long term. Understand that everyone's got a different level of what's hard in life, and when you go through things like this, once you come out of them, you become more resilient. Your new idea of hard is so much harder than it used to be, which allows you to even catch those waves on the upside even higher. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely. And then for anybody who's listening, wanting to get in touch with you, whether it's kind of talk about your journey, need some guidance, help, anything like that, or hopefully there's like a shot in the dark and there's another venue or vendor who wants to reach out to you for another contract. How can those individuals get connected with you?
yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn, Jacob Talkin, Talkin, or they can email me, jacobtalkin@gmail.com. I would love to talk to anyone that's in the food and beverage business, or anyone who might have symptoms they can't
Yeah.
tie to anything, because I know what
Yeah.
that feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'll make sure to get all that in the notes on the show for you, so it's super easy for everybody to kind of just go and click and on the links. Jacob, thanks again for hopping on today, going through all of this. I know just from you and I, this is not the last interaction with us, and so looking forward to kind of continue our conversations and everything like that. For anybody who's listening, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review so we can continue to produce more episodes like this. And please share this episode on whatever social media platform you're on, so we can continue to get more exposure for the podcast, and so Jacob can continue to share what he's gone through with his autoimmune and being an entrepreneur. Until next time, this is The Unfair Advantage.